We want to turn now to the issue of the imprisoned journalist Julian Assange. We are very honored to be joined here by Kevin Gosztola, who is the managing editor of shadowproof.com, curator of the Dissenter newsletter, and also the co-host of the podcast Unauthorized Disclosure. He's got an okay co-host, Rania Khalek, whoever
wow. That was cold.
It's all right.
No.
I was not expecting that.
Somehow done it for 9 years now, so I guess she must be a little better than okay.
Yeah.
I hope so. It'd be a real shame if for 9 years I just steadily stayed okay.
No, you're great. Kevin's great. It's a great podcast. Unauthorized Disclosure.
Thank
Also, the Dissenter newsletter. Fantastic. A lot of great updates about whistleblowers and important things that we need to know. Kevin, thanks for being back with us.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
No, of course. So Julian Assange was back in court. He was, of course, there was the issue where it was ruled he could not be extradited, then that he could be extradited. Now I believe he was in court around an appeal and succeeded. So where does the case stand now?
Yeah, so there was just this very brief hearing. Nobody was really in court except the judges came in. A judge came in and read this announcement that essentially opened the door for Julian Assange's legal team to challenge this decision that had gone in the U.S.'s favor last year. And essentially what happened is they certified a point of law, which means that the team did hit upon something that is important for the Supreme Court to consider and deal with. And so hopefully now, so they're going to go before the British Supreme Court and they'll make an application on this point of law. And they'll say, and I'll just be specific here because I've been very vague. They're asking about the diplomatic assurances that were offered after the district judge ruled against the U.S. government. People who are unfamiliar, there were multiple things that the U.S. government put forward on appeal in order to try and get rid of any of the concerns that the judge had about how Assange would be treated in a U.S. jail or prison, what the effect would be on his mental health. Because remember, the judge ruled against the extradition, not on press freedom grounds, but because it would be oppressive for his mental health if he was extradited to the U.S. And now they can go before the Supreme Court and say, we think that it was wrong. And in fact, based on the law here in the UK, it was improper for the High Court to give these assurances weight when they were offered after the fact.
So I guess, Kevin, where does that leave this case? So they're going to appeal. It seems like the past couple of years, it's kind of just been this back and forth where a lot of time is going by. And as this time and these legal proceedings are going by, we're watching Julian Assange's health deteriorate further and further. We hear every time that there is a proceeding, we get a glimpse of him or someone gets a glimpse of him, and his mental health is worse, his physical health is worse. It just, at this point, it's a good thing, obviously, what happened, but it does seem like this kind of potential endless limbo. Is that a possibility where there's this potential endless limbo of back and forth, appeal and appeal? And meanwhile, could that be a goal here, is just to keep him behind bars, denying him proper medical care and letting him deteriorate further and further?
It is punishment by process. And I think that is a goal. I think that fundamentally, this may be what the Biden administration and the Justice Department under Joe Biden want and why they have not abandoned this case, because they are fine with just keeping him in limbo. What we see as the potential timeline going forward, the way that this all might unfold, it could be 2 to 3 years before they even get to the point where the Biden administration has to decide, okay, do we really want the backlash that will come from the world seeing us load a journalist on an airplane and bring him to the United States for a trial that is condemned, in a case that is widely condemned by press freedom and human rights organizations worldwide? And even when they win, there's always something about those victories that's a slap in the face to Julian Assange, or it's a hard pill to swallow for press freedom groups or human rights organizations. And this past week was no different, because they actually asked the High Court to say that it's of public importance, the fact that Julian Assange could be extradited to the U.S. and subject to inhuman treatment as a result of his actions. So they're saying they won't put him in highly restrictive conditions, or they won't send him to a supermax prison unless he commits some future act. Well, should somebody who's mentally ill or is suffering from tremendous physical deterioration be subject to torture or cruel and inhuman treatment simply because they do something that's run afoul of the expectations of the government that has him or her in their custody? Well, the High Court actually said, we've already settled this issue. We don't think the Supreme Court needs to look this over. And Amnesty International actually condemned this and put out a very strong statement on this, because this is an issue of torture. This is an issue of human rights that basically the High Court of Justice punted on in the UK. And we've just seen this time and time again, that the British government with this case has allowed themselves to be completely submissive to the interests of the US government and not stand up one bit, even as there's clear documentation. Niels Meltzer, UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, has a fantastic book coming out on February 8th that looks into that covers his investigations into the 4 governments implicated here. And he says, they basically tolerated his visit, but they engaged in soft harassment against me when I visited him in Belmarsh prison. They didn't have a doctor available for me to speak with. They didn't have a prison director available for me to talk to. They had no minister there for me to engage with, so I couldn't get into the politics of this extradition. I couldn't ask them, is there a way out of this so that Julian Assange isn't extradited? And they basically had just been hostile to anyone who examined the psychological torture that Julian Assange has undergone.
I mean, wow. I mean, I guess, you shouldn't be surprised. People say, but it's outrageous on so many different levels. What do we know about the timeline moving forward on this appeal, and when we can expect more news in this case, Kevin?
So they'll apply for, they have to get, just like here in the US, when you want to appeal, you have to get the court to accept it. They'll go before the Supreme Court, and then that'll take some time. And then I'll just say, again, just emphasize this fact that the real issue right now is that Biden's administration has not dropped the charges. All of this can go away. The legal team for Assange is going to do what they need to do to represent Julian Assange. But the real struggle outside the courtroom is forcing the Biden administration to drop these charges, because the Supreme Court, those proceedings could take most of this year. If Julian Assange loses, then it's not immediate that he would be extradited, because they can go back to the district court decision that initially saved him, and they can appeal how she did not uphold his journalistic rights, I'll put it that way. And they can go to the High Court of Justice. But the High Court of Justice is hostile. It's run by Chief Justice Lord Ian Burnett, who has a close friend who was part of the team that actually was involved in expelling Julian Assange from the Ecuador embassy. So I don't have much hope in that. So they'll probably fail at the High Court level, and then they'll have to appeal to the Supreme Court. And all of these proceedings take about a half to a year. And when you add that all up, that's a long time to tick off the clock. And you ask yourself, how many more strokes will Julian Assange have while this process unfolds? What else will he develop? What other ailment will he develop? How many more years is he going to not be able to be a father to his children while he's in prison? Things that we think of when we're dealing with people who are political prisoners. And the only way this gets resolved is that there is no solution in the legal system. This legal system is part and parcel of this political punishment that Julian Assange has undergone. And the only way this goes away is forcing the Biden administration to back down. And there are a few people in some high places who have tried to force the Biden administration to answer for why they are doing this. And they're cowards. They won't defend this. I don't think they can publicly defend this, which leads me to believe that if he is about to be boarded onto a plane, that they might abandon it. And to me, that's even more craven and a little bit more disgusting than Mike Pompeo and Donald Trump, just because I know that deep down in that administration, they believe in depriving First Amendment rights to journalists. They believe that journalists and people in the media can be enemies of them and of the people, and they'll talk about everyone in those terms. But as far as the Biden administration goes, they want to put on this veneer of caring about the First Amendment and freedom of the press. And so they're willing to push this all the way up to the last moment, I think, until they'll finally abandon it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kevin, really appreciate you joining us, helping us sort through all of this. And I hope people are following the Dissenter newsletter. If you're signed up for it, following shadowproof.com and Unauthorized Disclosure, where you're breaking it all down for us in real time. Thanks for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thank you both.